What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on the Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me once again is DJ Boyer. What's up, DJ?
Second time, so I guess I did okay first time out. I think it went really well. All's well. We got that first weekend of football behind us. Things are just right with the world. The air smells sweeter. It's just, I just can't put it into words.
Absolutely. And so last Friday we did a little preemptive before week one. Wanted to chat, threw a few names out there. Some of the names we talked about actually popped, so that was cool to see. But yeah, we'll be here usually Tuesday or Wednesday in your YouTube, in your iTunes, in your Stitcher feed, wherever you happen to catch the podcast. If there's somewhere else you want the podcast, definitely hit me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. I will do my best to get it to wherever you listen to the show. But, yeah, we'll be here recapping, talking about the big stories, talking about the big injuries, giving you a few names to target on the waiver wire. As always, head to fakepigskin.com for waiver wire, for QB streamers, for streaming defenses, for IDP, for everything you need to win your fantasy league. So, DJ, week one, we are recording this before the two Monday night games. So we no Raiders, Rams, or Jets, Lions. But from the Sunday slate, from what you saw, who really impressed you in week one? Maybe a name, maybe two names. Who jumped off the page to you?
Well, I'd say first, you'd be remiss if you didn't mention Tampa Bay, because really Ryan Fitzpatrick and the performance that he put up there, a lot of eyebrows were raised when a lot of management came out and said, look, after week 3, there's no guarantee that Jameis Winston is going to be our starter. And I think all of us kind of chuckled. We thought that's like, that's really not going to happen. Well, after that first performance, I don't think anybody's chuckling anymore. And you have to wonder, is this the Saints defense of years ago where they're going to have to play in shootouts all the time? Or, last year they stepped it up. And I think that's why they were such a Super Bowl contender and the team that I thought was actually going to represent the NFC going in to the playoffs, or again, has New Orleans reverted back where they're going to be giving up 35 plus points every week, and it's going to be on Drew Brees' shoulders. I was just very impressed with the way that Tampa Bay offense looked.
Yeah, the Tampa Bay offense was incredible. Peyton Barber, Mike Evans. We had a big breakout from Deshaun Jackson, reminded us how good he can be. But I'm kind of in the ballpark of maybe that Saints defense wasn't great. Maybe they got a lot of turnovers. Maybe things kind of went well. I think obviously we've seen with Dallas at times and with other teams, when you can run the ball really well and really effectively, it's easier to keep that defense off the field. It makes them play better when they are on the field. And kind of as you look at them, they look like they're playing amazing. When they're really not playing that great, they're just not on the field a ton, not creating a lot of mistakes. And then if Lattimore makes a few picks, all of a sudden it looks great. So I am curious to see if they're going to be a little more run heavy with Alvin Kamara. Obviously, Kamara was insane, picked up right where he left off. He looked great. James Conner, who was incredible, 31 carries, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 catches on his 6 targets for 57 yards. He got 100% of the RB touches, which I thought was kind of crazy. I know both of us were kind of hoping Jalen Samuels at least, for PPR leagues would be interesting. But it looks like as long as Lev Bell's out, James Conner is the guy you want in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, wasn't as great down the stretch, but from a fantasy standpoint, you're going to feed him the ball 30 times. I don't know if we're going to see that week in and week out, but he was able to shoulder the workload, got in the end zone twice. So from a fantasy standpoint, that was the way to go. We talked a lot about Juju Schuster-Smith, and he ended up with the most catches for Pittsburgh on the day. So
yeah.
Again, I think that was positive on our part. And, I think that there's really no end in sight to this. So is this going to be another 1-2 weeks? Could this be a season-long thing? It's really kind of unbeknownst to us all the time as of this moment. But I think Pittsburgh's in capable hands, although at least, the Browns are not going to be 0-16 this year. So let's applaud Cleveland. They're at least 0-15. And things are looking up for the Browns.
I'm really hoping they tie in all 16 games. I think that would be so Browns, and that would be amazing. If you own James Conner, are you comfortable? Are you selling him? at his peak value, saying this guy's the guy here. You want him, and maybe it's for a guy that maybe is like more of like a third or fourth round pick. Maybe you go, okay, I'm willing to trade for Kenyon Drake, for Alex Collins, we'll talk about Collins here in a minute. We'll talk about, maybe a guy that you could potentially start 15 or 16 weeks instead of a guy that could be a 3, 4, maybe 5-week starter.
Wow, that's a great question. And I think that, I think if you're on a team where you've got some good depth at the running back position and you can kind of afford to put it out there, I think you really do look at trading him.
Yeah.
But I think, and if you're really devoid of that solid number 2, because Connor's a good play right now, but really don't want to be in the situation where he was your number 1 back. I mean, if that were the case, you were really kind of looking elsewhere in your leagues and kind of going probably toward a pass happy system, or really kind of getting that quarterback early. So it would really, now's a good time to do it. Why not? As you said, this is probably the highest that his value is. So that's definitely a smart play.
Yeah, if I'm a Lev Bell owner, obviously I'm not doing it. But if I just picked up Connor or drafted him late or whatever, I'm absolutely looking to trade him. Even, maybe you're looking for a receiver. Maybe you think, okay, maybe T.Y. Hilton's a name that I'll go after, or maybe Keenan Allen or something like that. If you can pull that off, absolutely pull the trigger. So there's 2 names that I want to mention in terms of week 1 impressions. Joe Mixon, it was 1 week. It was against not a very good Colts defense, so I'm not going to go too crazy. But 17 for 95, a touchdown, and then 5 for 54 in the passing game. Looks every bit an RB1, every bit a bell cow, and every bit a guy that I completely whiffed on. I thought was going to be a train wreck. I saw a lot of inefficiency a year ago. I worry about the offensive line. I worry about that offense. And maybe that comes to fruition, and maybe this is, shows how really bad the Colts defense is. But as far as I'm concerned, Joe Mixon is a lock and loaded start every week, and don't even think about it.
I hope you're right, because in my primary league, he was my 2nd round pick, and I was really questioning myself. It's probably the riskiest pick that I took, being picking in the middle, 6th in a 12-person league. Yeah. I ended up with Julio Jones. The running back train started, and I was like, oh no, what am I going to end up with? I felt that I reached a little bit on Mixon, so if he's able to put up numbers similar to this, I'm quite happy with him being an RB1. Even though I have him, I'm not 100% sold, but it's got to be the best that you felt about Joe Mixon. I mean, he's a guy that we thought coming out last year was kind of someone that was going to be slept upon and really could have a sneaky season, and it just never materialized. So the fact that he was able to have his best game as a pro, that's an encouraging sign for Cincinnati Bengal owners and fantasy owners everywhere. So I'm with you. I'm hoping it's well. So
yeah. I mean, if he plays like this, he's probably a first-round pick going into next season. And if you took him in the 2nd or 3rd round, he could be a guy that helps you win your league. The other guy is Tyreek Hill. I bang the table so hard for this guy. I love him. There was a lot of regression talk. He's an explosive player, but 3 touchdowns in week 1. Punt returns, pop passes, down the field. Pat Mahomes is a revelation. Even though that the Kareem Hunt wasn't great, even though Travis Kelce wasn't great, Pat Mahomes and Tyreek Hill made sweet music all day on Sunday, and very, very happy to have him. A quick note I did want to mention before we talk a couple guys that struggled and get into some injuries. Dion Lewis, what is clearly the guy in Tennessee, whether that's when they're down and they he's going to be involved in the passing game or just kind of as the runner. I'm a Titans fan. I watch this game very closely. Dion Lewis outsnapped Derrick Henry 70% to 30% in week 1. This is all per Graham Barfield over at NFL Media and using next gen stats. And Lewis outsnapped Henry 14-0 on 3rd downs. And Lewis also had 6-2 in terms of red zone looks. So, it's clearly they trust Dion Lewis. Derrick Henry did have a huge touchdown run that ended up getting called back for a holding call, I believe. He would have had a touchdown and had a decent game. But I think Derrick Henry is a guy that is going to be probably a borderline RB2, flex play most weeks. If he has that big rushing touchdown, he's going to look great. But other than that, I think this is the Dion Lewis show. And, Dion Lewis is going after Henry in a lot of leagues, and I'm very happy to own him where I do.
He was one of the guys I was going to mention as far as making sure that you get him. I think there were so many people that heard about the retirement of DeMarco Murray that, this is the year, this is the time. It's all about Derrick Henry. And Dion Lewis, I think, clearly is the man. And you really got to think, too, what about the health of Marcus Mariota and that elbow injury? Because if we're looking at Blaine Gabbert for an extended period of time, Gabbert's a guy who's much more prone to checking down and will not go downfield as much as Mariota will. So you definitely want a person who's better at catching the football, which obviously is Dion Lewis more than Derrick Henry. So I think he already is the number one. And if there is an injury of where Mariota is going to miss significant time, I think that only proves your point even more and accentuates Dion Lewis's value.
Yeah, if they're going to be a bad team, and we'll kind of jump into that injury real quick because Mariota is dealing with an elbow injury. Taylor Lewan actually left this game with a concussion, who's their stud left tackle and protects Mariota's blind side. And Delaney Walker fractured his ankle. It was an ugly, ugly injury. He is done for the year. We'll give you a couple tight end names to target on the waiver wire here in a bit. But this offense is quickly becoming a mess. And if Gabbert's in there, if the offensive line is restructured, a lot of Dion Lewis, a lot of checkdowns, and it could be a long season for us Titans fans. Speaking of riding the struggle bus, let's talk about Alex Collins, because this is a guy we talked about in our first show. And, you kind of mentioned a lot of what happened is Alex Collins is kind of touchdown dependent. Didn't get a ton of yards. He had 7 carries for 13 yards on Sunday in a game the Ravens completely dismantled the Bills. Obviously, the touchdown saved his day. But, Kenneth Dixon was the guy you were kind of saying, hey, look ahead, look ahead. He ended up getting a lot of run kind of at the end, but then ended up getting a knee injury and is expected to miss some time. So it looks like as of now, Collins is the guy, but is he a guy you're comfortable starting most weeks?
I'm not really comfortable starting him at this point. It's just a shame because we really mentioned this is really a make or break year for Kenneth Dixon. It looked like everything was set up. And unfortunately, looks like the injury bug has bit him again. So I think it's really become Alex Collins now kind of as a just kind of addition by subtraction per se. So really he just had a lot of touchdowns near the end of last year. He was very I think he only had 2 or 1 going into like week 13, and had I think the last 4 games he got in the end zone every time. So it remains to be seen about Alex Collins, but really that was just kind of a dismantling there. That was over pretty quick. I think it was more about trying to showcase Lamar Jackson and what they're going to be doing with that offense and the new weapons at wide receiver, John Brown, Willie Snead. How are those guys going to fit in? So overall, a fantastic day. You couldn't have wrote a script that was any better for Baltimore, but I still think there's major questions at the running back position.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see they on the road against Cincinnati this week. So on a short week, they're playing Thursday. It'll be really interesting to see how much work Collins gets, and but yeah, I think the Lamar Jackson wrinkle is interesting. They did use him in a variety of ways and end arounds, and I think there will be some plays where he ends up throwing, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how his impact is. And clearly, he impressed enough in camp to warrant those touches. And this is an offense I think that has some potential to rebound a little bit from what we've seen, especially last year. All 3, Willie Snead, Michael Crabtree, and John Brown, all found the end zone. So the next couple weeks for Baltimore will be really interesting. Obviously, this Bills team is a complete mess, so start anyone against the Bills and feel pretty good. Kenyon Drake is the other running back that I wanted to talk about. 17 touches against the Titans, 14 carries for 48 yards, 3 carries for 18 yards, while Frank Gore only had 9 carries. He had 61 yards, over 6 yards a carry, looked really good. Obviously, it is an older guy on the back end of his career, but the juice is clearly still there. If you're a Kenyon Drake owner, are you starting to get a little worried that this might be a little more of a time split than we had anticipated?
I think this is a running back by committee coach. I think this is a 1A, 1B. This might be scheming toward the team that you're playing at the time, who's got the hot hand. You do want to limit touches for a guy like Frank Gore. Drake has shown potential, but really doesn't have that kind of breakout moment yet. So right now you got to approach this with caution. And yeah, Frank Gore performed a lot better than you would have hoped if you are a Kenyon Drake owner. I think there's some dark days ahead and a lot of questions.
Yeah, at least in the passing game, Drake will get the majority of the work. But it will be interesting to see when Kalen Ballage, if he can get back and involved in this offense. He does have some explosiveness and some ability as a pass catcher to make that an impact. And then all of a sudden we have a three-headed monster that is just a reason to run away. Let's jump into some injuries, and we'll start with Aaron Rodgers, who, I mean, Aaron Rodgers continues to boggle my mind in terms of his ability as a quarterback. He is insane. He basically left the game on a cart thinking, oh, okay, his season's done, or at least for a while. Comes out in the second half and puts on one of the best shows despite not being able to play on that left knee, and comes and brings the Packers all the way back to win the game. Including a big Randall Cobb touchdown that was so much fun to watch. But, now they're saying, Mike McCarthy said no decision has been made about whether Rodgers can play on Sunday against the Vikings. If you're an Aaron Rodgers owner, if you're a Devontae Adams owner, you're a Randall Cobb owner, like, are you nervous? Are you concerned? Where are you at?
I think you're definitely nervous. I think it's if you're a Jamal Williams owner, this is probably great news for you. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to get a little more touches actually in the running game. And I think when Kaiser came in, he threw some good balls, a couple of good passes. I mean, there were a couple turnovers.
Yeah.
So I think if you look at that line, I don't think it's really reminiscent of how he looked. He's a guy that I really liked coming out last year. I just didn't think that Cleveland should have thrown him to the wolves and started him from day one. And I think don't say it broke him. I think Green Bay really recognized the talent that was there, and he's in a great situation. But obviously, nobody wants to see him with the possibility of being the starter in his second game as a Packer. So I think you're a little worried. Even Geronimo Allison, I think with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, Geronimo Allison's a guy who seems to have built some rapport with Aaron Rodgers, and I think is a good pickup. So I think if Rodgers is able to turn this around and is healthy, Allison's a good pickup.
Yeah, I actually am glad to see that I'm not the only crazy person that actually thinks DeShone Kaiser's pretty good. I think being thrown into the wolves like that, I think Khalil Mack was he's an insane player that is pretty much like showed why did the Raiders trade you? That is the dumbest move you could have possibly done. But yeah, I think DeShone Kaiser showed some good things. I think, obviously having that array of weapons, in deeper 2-quarterback leagues, if you're looking for, a streamer to 16-team league and DeShone Kaiser's under center, I don't hate using him. Obviously has the economic code availability of running the ball, so adds to that. But yeah, obviously everyone wants Aaron Rodgers out there. And, it might be something where they let Kaiser play this week against Minnesota, let him do his whole thing. And even if you lose to Minnesota, well, that's okay, because you're looking at the next 14 weeks. You're not really worried about winning game 2. So if there's any questions, maybe they do that. But it will be interesting to kind of see how that goes and whatnot. Let's head down to Jacksonville and talk about Leonard Fournette. He left with a hamstring injury on Sunday. Pretty early against the Giants. It was definitely frustrating for Leonard Fournette owners. I guess if he's out, TJ Yeldon looks to be the clear handcuff there. Is he a guy that, if we get some clarification, you're making one of your primary pickups this week?
Absolutely. I don't think you're going to get a ton of yards out of him, but he's a pretty good pass catcher out of the backfield. Actually, from year 1 to year 2 last year, it was probably the biggest asset of his game, or where he made the most strides, was as a pass catcher. Mm-hmm. He just doesn't have that second level. He doesn't have that elite speed, but he's got pretty good hands. Really, with him coming out of the backfield, it's getting separation away from those linebackers has always been the problem. But anything, the catch radius you throw around him, he's going to get it. Good runner, serviceable runner, but obviously he's no Leonard Fournette. But, he's someone that I think he's a person to kind of target on draft day as well, because we've seen this with Leonard Fournette, even in college.
Yep.
Hamstrings, ankle. It's something that sometimes follows you, which is why I'll even go somewhere else. Saquon Barkley. I'm not convinced this guy's going to go through this year healthy. That one big run, but aside from that, it's just a lot of small runs and then one big play. I see too much of that. So I think right now you were talking about selling a person like James Conner. Saquon Barkley, I think so many people are electrified, and wow, he got 100 yards. If you're able to get a good, I'm just not sold on Barkley. If you're able to get someone to the curb and get max value for him, he's another guy. I'm just not sold. And I think T.J. Yeldon is a pretty good pickup. He's a guy that's probably going to get about 50 to 60 yards a week, but always a threat for a touchdown. One, maybe two touchdowns a week. It's going to pad those totals for you.
Yeah, I watched that Jaguars game pretty closely, and Eli Manning I don't know, it was just kind of a mess. And I'm a little concerned about, I own Barkley in a couple leagues. I'm probably holding on to him, but I mean, like you're saying, if I could trade him for Joe Mixon plus, I think that's a move I would absolutely do. If I could trade him for T.Y. Hilton and a running back that I can use, I might consider that. But yeah, I think Wayne Gallman is an interesting name if you're looking to stash somebody. His rookie year wasn't the best, but he would be probably in line if something happens to Barkley. We'll talk about Doug Baldwin, who was reportedly 80% coming in to the season. He's got a grade 2 MCL tear. The Seahawks are working to figure out how long he's going to be out. So, it sounds like it'll be, at least a couple weeks, one would guess. Brandon Marshall looked good, almost had 2 touchdowns, has definitely scored 1. Tyler Lockett looked pretty good. I guess if you're adding a Seahawks receiver, who is it?
I really think it's Brandon Marshall. A lot of times you want to stay away from these aging players, but especially with the injury to Baldwin, I think you really got to look Marshall now. He looks good. It's really just, again, creating separation. It was the offensive pass interference that took away another touchdown for him. But Russell Wilson's a pretty accurate guy. He's going to get it to you. And what I like about here is Marshall's a guy who always in his career has done well when the play kind of breaks down. He's able to improvise and really kind of go off script. And that's something we see so much out of Russell Wilson, that he moves around so much in the pocket. Not the most accurate person in the world, but you're not going to find a lot of people that are as accurate as him on the move. Yeah. And I think that those improvisational skills with Wilson, his ability to throw on the run, and Marshall able to kind of break off routes and really improvise and help his quarterback, I think it's going to pay dividends. And I think Brandon Marshall, again, if he stays healthy, is primed for a pretty big year, even with or without Baldwin. But
yeah, I like that.
This just enhances his value right now.
I like that call quite a bit. I added him in a lot of late rounds in my best ball leagues and whatnot. I think he's going to be the more reliable option on a week-to-week basis. I think Tyler Lockett, if you're in leagues where you get big touchdown bonuses, 50-yard touchdowns, I think he could be interesting there. I think there will be some big plays, but I think he'll be very boom or bust, where I think Marshall will be a lot more consistent on a week-to-week basis and a lot more impactful in the red zone. The big physical guy, obviously Jimmy Graham's gone. It'll be interesting to see kind of how that is. If you're a Russell Wilson owner, without Doug Baldwin, are you starting to get a little concerned, a little squeamish?
I think I was a little and I'm a Russell Wilson owner. There was my 3rd round pick. We already categorized my first 2. So, hey, that's how my first 3 rounds went. Julio Jones, Joe Mixon, Russell Wilson. With Wilson, just because, again, historically, when people have so much of a percentage of the offense on your shoulders, like it was just insane. It was close to 75% of the offense going through Wilson last year, and just how important he is in that running game. You kind of wait for that breakdown. He had pretty good numbers. I mean, 298, did have a couple picks, but 3 touchdowns, but only 5 yards rushing. I think we're going to see some weeks where that goes up. I think he's still someone you got to play, but there is some cause for concern there. There's definitely cause for concern, but I don't think you quite hit the panic button yet, but you watch it closely.
The one thing I'm going to say about Seattle is add Rashad Penny, trade for Rashad Penny if you can do it. We heard all offseason how he was out of shape, how this, that, and the third, how Chris Carson stole the job. Rashad Penny out-touched Chris Carson yesterday. Chris Carson also fumbled yesterday. I think it's a matter of time before Rashad Penny is the guy in this offense. And if there's questions on the receiving core, I think that means even more carries for Rashad Penny. I think he's a guy that if you can get him now, I highly, highly, highly recommend you do that. Let's talk about another tight end injury, and this one could end up being serious. Greg Olsen left the game, foot injury. It's a foot injury that he's dealt with before. Saw on crutches after the game. Obviously, if you're a Cam Newton owner, this isn't great, but Curtis Samuel should be back. They have Funchess, they have McCaffrey, they have weapons, so they should be okay. DJ Moore hopefully steps up. But if you're in need of a tight end, Delaney Walker's out for the year. Greg Olsen probably going to miss some time. Jordan Reed and Tyler Eifert are two names that, while they're healthy, I don't hate adding and using. Eric Ebron's another game. George Kittle was a huge weapon for the Niners. I was worried about that whole offense, but he was targeted early and often and should have had a long touchdown. He was really good. Check your ownership levels. Some leagues he's widely available. Other leagues or other sites he's heavily owned. So check that out. Ben Watson and Jonnu Smith in Tennessee replacing Delaney Walker are a few names I like. Is there a name or two that really stick out to you of the guys I've kind of mentioned?
Yeah, well, one, you can even go there in Carolina. They did draft Ian Thomas out of Indiana, who looks to be a very good player. I think there's still a little bit of a curve there. But one guy that didn't jump out on the stat sheet and I think is largely just overlooked. Yesterday, just 2 catches, 29 yards. But I think as the season goes on, he's a guy that's going to creep up and be a big red zone target. Jake Butt in Denver.
Love it.
A lot of people forget how Jake Butt was, considered maybe the top tight end. Tore his ACL. It was actually the second time he tore the same ACL. Now, he did get 4 targets yesterday, 2 catches.
Yep.
Looked very, very good. And I think, again, as Case Keenum starts to build, there's so much attention to that receiving core there with Sanders, and they're going to be bringing Cortland Sutton along and Demaryius Thomas. A guy that maybe 40 catches, but again, could easily be a sneaky 6 to 8 touchdown guy. I think he's a good red zone target. And I think Jake Butt is just one of those guys that not a lot of people are going to look to because he didn't put up big numbers. But if you can stash someone away, I think he's bound to have a couple big games during the season.
I love that call. I'm all in on Jake Butt this year. I think he's going to have a monster year, and I could see him being a guy, especially over the second half, that really asserts himself and really becomes a fantasy viable option. And they play Oakland next week. I think Case Keenum's going to get that offense rolling, and when we talk waiver wire ads, we'll mention another piece of that offense I think is very interesting. But I think that's a great call. I'm not chasing Will Dissly. 3 catches for over 100 yards. Obviously had that long touchdown. I mean, obviously there's going to be options with Doug Baldwin gone and that passing game needing some help, but Nick Vannett still had more touches, more snaps. So I expect that to kind of be a mess, and Dissly's not someone I'm picking up after week 1 and expecting him to be a guy I use most weeks. So if you're heading to the waiver wire, give me your top 3 ads after week 1.
Well, another guy that I think might kind of slip under the radar, but we talked about Ryan Fitzpatrick, and of course, maybe if you're able to get him. But again, Deshaun Jackson, you've got Mike Evans, the top 2 targets in Tampa Bay, probably going in a lot of leagues, but both of them, again, hamstrings. There's injuries to follow. Chris Godwin had a very good second half to the year, had 4 catches, I believe about 51, 61 yards yesterday. You don't want to see injuries, but the chances of one of these two missing some time with a leg or hamstring-related injury is very high. Yep. If Fitzpatrick continues this role, I think Godwin's a guy you can get on the cheap, and I think he's primed for big things. He's a future 1,000-yard receiver in this league. This is probably the last year for Jackson in Tampa Bay. I think he's being groomed to eventually be the number 2.
Yep.
But I think the chances of him producing now, vice later, are also high. I think is another sneaky guy that you can get in on the waiver wire.
Yeah, 60 to 70% of leagues he's available in. I love that call. I expect Tampa Bay to need to throw to stay in these games, and Fitzmagic showed enough in week 1 that he will be a guy who chucks the ball. And I think, he didn't even throw it 30 times and they put up that kind of production. I think he's going to be a 35 to 40 kind of guy. I think there's plenty of room. I think Djax will have his big weeks, but I think Chris Godwin will actually be more consistent on a week-to-week basis. And, the tight ends weren't really used. So if we go Evans, we go Djax, and we go Godwin, I think that's a very reasonable 1, 2, 3. The top guy for me is Philip Lindsay. He and Royce Freeman split touches. They both had 17 carries for 51 yards. Philip Lindsay was involved in the passing game, ended up getting a touchdown. Devontae Booker is clearly not in the picture. He had a handful of touches. And I like this Broncos offense. I think there's a lot to be excited about. We talked about Jake Butt. I think Case Keenum, the difference between him and whatever they've had at quarterback the past couple of years is astounding. So I like Philip Lindsay, and even if he's a guy that you're flexing or helping you fill in for bye weeks initially, I think it's a great name. And if he keeps playing the way he is, he might steal more work, and he might, if Royce Freeman gets banged up or whatever, find a way to take this job. So I think if you need running back help, if you can stash, I think Philip Lindsay's a great name to target.
I think so too. Just one more point about Godwin too. You notice the shirt, the Eagles. That is who Tampa Bay goes against next week. You got to remember the Eagles were number 1 against the run last season. They really held Devontae Freeman in check. So you got to pass on Philadelphia. So I think even though Philadelphia probably wins that game, they're probably going to be favored. I think Fitzpatrick still is a good day because they're going to have to put the ball up, and that's the way to kind of be successful. But another running back that I like as well, Chris Thompson. Yep. I think that so much attention has been paid now to Adrian Peterson. He had a very good game, got in the end zone, played well. Chris Thompson, those 6 catches, I think you're going to see him get a few more carries. Just, at Peterson's age, is he going to be able to do this week in and week out? I doubt it. But even if he does get the majority of the carries, like we saw yesterday, PPR leagues, Chris Thompson, 6 catches, came off that ACL tear, has looked very well. Did not hesitate at all yesterday. The 6 catches and well in the backfield. I think Chris Thompson is going to be a good play as well on a Redskin team that probably finishes around 500, but I think they're going to put up some points.
Yep.
I think there could be some shootouts. Thompson's a guy that easily is going to 6 to 8 touchdowns, maybe even approaching double digits, not out of the question. I think so many people are going to think about, the resurgence of Adrian Peterson, that Chris Thompson's going to get overlooked, and I'm sure he's available in a lot of leagues. And if you're able to stash another running back away, I think that's a good play as well.
Yeah, and I expect this, when you're not playing Arizona, for the Redskins to have to throw a lot more, and for Adrian Peterson not to be able to pile up the carries. And I think Chris Thompson's a great name. And if you lost Mariota, if you're worried Aaron Rodgers might not play, Alex Smith is, if he's floating around your waiver wire, absolutely worth an ad. We'll have up on Fake Pigskin tomorrow some QB streamers that you can target. But yeah, I love the Chris Thompson call. Let me dig through my list here and see if I can throw out another name. I'm going to throw out Austin Eckler. I was a little hesitant in terms of how much usage he would get with a healthy Melvin Gordon. Obviously, if Gordon goes down, Eckler steps in. He's explosive. He's useful in the passing game. I think he'll be viable. But this Chargers team loved throwing to the running backs yesterday. It didn't matter if it was early. It didn't matter if they were down. It didn't matter if it was close. They checked it down. They checked it down often. So Eckler caught 5 balls for 87 yards. Obviously found the end zone. Carried it a handful of times. I think they're going to want to keep Melvin Gordon healthy, and I think that means more Eckler. So if in PPR leagues especially, 10 to 15 touches from Eckler, I think this is a guy that is going to help get you through bye weeks. A guy that if you start a wide receiver heavy could make a lot of sense. And if he's floating around on your wire, which in most leagues, 80 to 90% of leagues, he's going to be out there. So I think Austin Eckler is a great name to target as well.
Yeah, and I'll go one more off my list. Again, if you were watching the game last night before the amazing comeback, Tariq Cohen, a guy that I drafted, I think that it's become more and more, I think, apparent with this new offense. It's kind of gimmicky, but you got to like some of the calls that Chicago had done. There's definitely some different looks they're giving you. But Cohen's a guy that I think is going to have as many touches as Jordan Howard. He's more built for this offense. Obviously, very small. You're going to want to limit the carries. But again, another guy out of the backfield that I think can cause some damage. Or if you're in a league where maybe your special teams and defenses are tied together, Chicago defense made great strides. They're probably a top 10 defense this year. Just the punt return value that Cohen's going to be able to give you as well, if you can use him individually or again, think about that as enhancing your defense. Cohen's a guy that's going to be creative. I think he's kind of Tyreek Hill light right now. I don't think he has the catch radius. Hill's just amazing the way he can go for balls at his size. Cohen he can just turn that corner just very, very fast. And I think that the RPO there and with Mitch Trubisky, I really think it just looks like he's more comfortable when Cohen's in the game as his primary back, vice Jordan Howard. So Cohen's another guy that I think you can I don't know if the consistency's there, but there's going to be 2 or 3 weeks where he has multiple touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm still team Jordan Howard, and I like the usage he got. But I will be interesting. I really want to watch this Bears team over the next couple weeks on offense to see how Trubisky plays, how they're, what kind of game scripts they get into, if they're throwing a lot because they're down, or if this defense is better, then I think we could see more Jordan Howard. But yeah, obviously Tariq Cohen is a guy that if he's out there, you add. And I don't, in PPR especially, I don't mind trying to field offers and see if you can't get him on the cheap. One more receiver I want to throw out is Mike Williams. Obviously in Yahoo, he's a lot less available, but in ESPN, he's available in 65% of leagues. I think this is going to be the guy that ends up being a lot of third downs for Phil Rivers, a lot of deep shots. Got a Michael Floyd and Vincent Jackson comp on the broadcast yesterday. And I think when they get in close and they're in the red zone, Old Man Gates is still floating around, but no Hunter Henry. I think Williams is going to be the guy they target when they get in close. And I think as the season gets going, he's going to be a guy that's close to 90% owned in all formats, and be super viable and super reliable on a week-to-week basis. Obviously, Keenan Allen will be the one, but with Phil Rivers, and I have questions about this defense, especially if Bosa misses a few more weeks. Denzel Perriman's banged up. Jason Verrett's out for the season. If this Chargers defense is a mess, it could be a lot of throwing for Phil Rivers, and I think Mike Williams could really be a big benefit of that offense and of that scheme.
Absolutely. If anybody out there is a fan of prop bets or just kind of weird bets you can do in Vegas, right now Phillip Rivers was the odds-on favorite to have the most pass attempts in the NFL this season, just ahead of Matthew Stafford. So I think that goes back to your point with the defense. I think Phillip Rivers is going to be putting the ball up a ton this year. So there's going to be chances for Mike Williams is definitely going to have the opportunity to step up and be a more viable option in that Chargers offense.
100%. Okay, so we're going to get out of here pretty quickly, and we got a couple Monday Night Football games we got to watch, so we'll address those when we come back next week. But DJ, as we start to look ahead towards week 2, is there a player or a team or something you're really looking forward to, saying, I really want to see if this happens in week 2 or if this continues? Is there something that springs to mind?
You kind of touched upon it already. I really think the Bears, that offense was really a turnaround. It wasn't a huge game for Mitch Trubisky, but the way he carried himself, he just seemed to be so much more at ease, and you can really start to see him kind of maybe reigning in control of that team. He's obviously got better weapons, Allen Robinson there, and I think we're going to see over the second half of the season, Anthony Miller, the draft pick out of Memphis, I think is someone that's going to contribute maybe in the second half of the season. But I'm a little anxious to see that, and I think we've got breaking news. I think I just heard the Titans and Dolphins game's finally over. If anybody's out there,
no, I think they had another weather delay, so they're going to finish it next Thursday.
Sometime by week 4, it might actually be done. But I think the Bears offense, that just really intrigued me. The different looks, they just seem so boring and bland the last few years. And even though they lost that game, I would make the argument that as a Bears fan, I'm happier than a Packers fan right now, because I still think there's something to this Aaron Rodgers injury. I think he's going to miss some time. And even though it was an amazing comeback, I still kind of like you lost the game. And the Bears, I think you kind of come away like that. That's almost like a win for you. You don't want to say there's, you want to get the W, obviously, but
Yeah.
there's some promise there. There's definitely some promise. And we didn't even talk about Khalil Mack and the
Yeah.
amazing first half. That was just sick.
Yeah, it was like, can we? Let me check the MVP odds for Khalil Mack really quick. Let me get on that. It's gonna be. I think the Bears are gonna be really interesting because this is either gonna be a thing that says, "Hey, we just went toe to toe with Green Bay Packers. Yes, Aaron Rodgers played like Superman and was incredible, and that's why they won. But we can do this." Or they're gonna go, "We played our best game and we still lost. This sucks. We're gonna completely collapse." So I think either like, a borderline playoff team or like 4-12 is in their future. So I'm definitely interested to see that. And I really want to watch the Thursday night game this week. Thursday night games can be weird, so I don't want to go too crazy on it. But I really want to see the involvement of Joe Mixon against a much better defense in Baltimore. And then on the opposite side, I want to see how much work Alex Collins gets against the Bengals. So I think that's going to be a game where I want to see both running backs play and play well and see if this is something that going forward we can be excited about both these guys.
And you got to remember the last time those guys faced each other, Week 17. I was at that game. I saw the fourth down play. I saw the Bengals. I've never heard a stadium go so quiet in my life. It's like a vacuum cleaner just came and sucked all the air out of the stadium. It was amazing. So you better believe the Ravens have been thinking about that the whole off season. So obviously the running backs there and what's going to happen. I think the other real thing too is the Bills quarterback situation. We talked about Deshaun Kaiser being thrown to the wolves. I'd hate to see the same thing happen to Josh Allen.
Yeah.
But with the ineffectiveness of Nathan Peterman, Tyrod Taylor not there, it's starting to look like it's going to happen sooner than later. And he's just not ready. He's just not ready. I wasn't high on him coming out of this draft, but I think you could see a very similar situation. So I'm anxious to see, hopefully, the Bills, just showing up, doing anything. This was as bad as opening could be. But for Josh Allen's sake and for the franchise, and a lot of people put their hope in that quarterback, I hope we don't see a repeat of that. But it feels like that could be what's happening.
Yeah, obviously we're seeing Sam Darnold tonight. I think we see Josh Allen in week 2. I think we see Josh Rosen in the first month of the season. These guys, Baker Mayfield even, these guys were all highly coveted assets that teams went way out of their way to get. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking in, the first week or 2 of October and all 4 of these rookie quarterbacks are the starters. But it's definitely something that I'm going to keep an eye on. And if you drafted LaShawn McCoy, I'm sorry. This offense looks like an absolute train wreck, and it may be tough sledding every single week. All right, DJ, this was a lot of fun. Good to catch up. Good to talk about week 1. We will be back to talk week 2. We'll also mix in some of the Monday night action if there's anything notable from either of the games. When we reconvene this time next week. But for DJ Boyer, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys down the road.